Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Darren Owing, your host for today's inaugural Thursday Thoughts. We're really happy to be here. This is a weekly policy discussion about creating a more livable city for everyone. Before we start, I want to give a shout out to our fabulous sponsors, Sonic. Like everyone else, Livable City, we've been going through a lot of changes, changing our programming. And Sonic, you've been wonderful partners, sticking with us every second, every step of the way. And Rogelio, you're great to work with. So thanks very much, Sonic. Thanks for being great sponsors. Our first guest for our inaugural Thursday Thoughts is Livable City's own guinea pig in chief, our executive director, Tom Radulovich. Tom is a past member of the BART Board of Directors and a well-known advocate for making the city more livable, more sustainable, more affordable. So thanks, Tom, you're the one that says thanks. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, and for setting up this chat. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, okay. So, it's been in the news a lot. One of the main concerns in this time of the pandemic is small businesses, whether, what we can do to help them survive and prosper through this time, make it to the hopefully the end of all this. So what are some ways that city planning can do to better help small businesses? And in particular, if you talk a little bit about some of the zoning changes that could happen.
Sure, and Darren, I think the COVID pandemic has really put this in very sharp relief, but we have been thinking about small business for years now because a lot of small businesses have been struggling in different corridors around the city with changes in the economy, rising rents, all sorts of things have really put stress on business. And I think COVID has really just exaggerated all of that. So some of the planning and zoning things we're thinking about kind of, I guess, fall into two big buckets. One is the rules that we impose on businesses. Are they flexible enough so that businesses can adapt their business strategies, what they do, how they do it, what they sell, and so on, in a nimble enough way so they can respond. The other thing we've been thinking about is, the rules for establishing a business, for moving a business, and so on. Some of those can be real hardships on business. It can end up adding years or months and a lot of uncertainty to simply moving next door, expanding your building footprint. I think the third area is public space. So right now there's a real interest in allowing businesses to use the public spaces of the city, so the streets, to move businesses' activities out there, whether that's dining or pick up and drop off, those sorts of things. We want to make sure that businesses can do what they need to do to survive, but that the other important functions of public space, which is mobility for everybody and universal design and safety, make sure that those things are preserved as well. So part of it's clearing away red tape, and that's a lot of what we've worked on for years. The other part of it is, kind of making sure that there's some good, strong, robust rules so that everybody benefits. As you're looking at kind of a corridor approach, whether that's
let me ask you about
enhancing public space or creating what we call a 10-minute neighborhood, a neighborhood where all the things of daily life are within a very short walk for more San Franciscans.
Okay, so let me ask you about red tape, because it's an interesting term, because we often hear big business and corporations saying too much red tape. You're standing in the way of us getting profits. So what's the nature of the red tape as it applies to small businesses? I would like to believe that in San Francisco, we've come up with good policies that protect our neighborhoods and support small businesses. What's this red tape you're talking about?
Well, I mean, red tape is the planning and zoning rules, and we have over 100 zoning districts in San Francisco. We have dozens and dozens of different uses. So these are activities that you might do in a building or in a business. And all of those are subject to different restrictions. So each zoning district has its own set of restrictions on what can be done, what can't be done, whether it's what's called principally permitted, which is just, you can just do it, whether it requires notification, whether it's conditionally permitted or not permitted. So it's always, so the process is, and you're never done, is really always looking and at those restrictions and saying, what purpose are they serving? The purpose of planning and zoning is to protect the public and to further the public good. And I think it's sort of asking, does each regulation serve the public good? And is it doing what it should be doing? Or is it doing what it was designed to do? So a lot of regulations, there was a problem they were trying to address, and this might have been decades ago, a problem that they were trying to address. So they put in a set of regulations in place. And the process is always about asking, well, do those regulations, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Is that still an objective? Is that still something that we care about and want to do? And is it doing it effectively? Or perhaps there's a different way to do it that allows businesses a little more flexibility, but is still responding to those neighborhood needs.
So I remember, I can't remember how long ago it was, but I do remember some controversy around number of bars in a neighborhood, and certainly if I've got a family, I don't want 20 bars a block away. Can you tell me about how that has worked out? Did it succeed in protecting neighborhoods while also allowing businesses to thrive? How did that work out?
Yeah, so about 20 years ago or more, a lot of neighborhood commercial districts, Castro is one, the Mission is another, just put moratoriums on the number of new bars. So no new bars are allowed. And that was in response to, a lot of neighbors saying, look, there's too many bars, too much saturation, some anti-alcohol sentiment in some of the neighborhoods too, just, that feeling like too many alcohol related businesses was actually not great in terms of the neighborhood's objectives around public health and addiction and so on. So, I think if you look at how those have worked out, they worked out. There's been some unintended consequences. One of the things that's happened is the only way to open a bar in one of those neighborhoods is to buy an existing bar business. And so what we've seen is this progressive upscaling of bars. The dive bars disappear and they become these kind of expensive bars because the only people who can spend a few $100,000s to buy a bar business are pretty well heeled and they want to make their money back. So those are sort of the unintended consequences you want to look for. I don't think anyone intended 20 years ago to say, oh, we want to make sure that all the only bars that remain in the neighborhood are these upscale expensive cocktail bars. That was not anyone's objective, but that's sort of one of the things that happened. So it's kind of going back and looking at, okay, well, what are the problems that bars create in a neighborhood? Is there a different way to regulate bar uses so that you would address those concerns, the legitimate concerns that neighbors have, that are probably still valid, but don't create that artificial shortage that creates that upscaling.
And earlier you said, something about, businesses need more flexibility to be able to move to a new space, set up somewhere else. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, a lot of the restrictions, for example, if uses can be what's called non-conforming, meaning they're not allowed anymore by the zoning, but they're there by dint of having existed before the zoning restrictions went in. So if you have a non-conforming business in a neighborhood commercial corridor, that often means you can't move locations. You are tied to that location. And so if, for example, there's a moratorium on restaurants in your neighborhood and you're a restaurant, you can't move your restaurant to another storefront in the neighborhood because it's a moratorium. What that does is it gives landlords a lot of leverage over local businesses. They know that their tenants can't move, and they know that they could actually get a higher paying restaurant. If a higher paying restaurant wants to come into the neighborhood, they can only go where there's an existing restaurant. So that's another one of these unintended consequences of the way that we regulate, is sometimes it actually gives building owners and landlords a big advantage in negotiating rents over their tenants, their retail tenants. And that's another problem I think I hope we can address in zoning.
Okay. Yeah, as I've learned about this, it's kind of interesting that one of the consequences I keep hearing about is giving advantages to landlords in their negotiations with their businesses and their renters and things like that. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what else do you have around the, we talked earlier also zoning around like, well, not necessarily zoning, some of the rules around in-law units and things. In a way, I'm pulling that one in here because sometimes one can stretch the definition of small business to, well, someone renting out their in-law unit. And
Yeah.
what have we been doing around that?
Yeah, well, the big focus for the past year has been what are called illegal in-laws. So this is another zoning problem of the late 60s. This city passed a bunch of restrictions, zoning restrictions that made it impossible to legally add units to buildings, but building owners kept doing it. And so now we have thousands of units, possibly tens of thousands of units in the city where people have been living. Many of them are rent controlled. Many of them have been around for decades, but they're what are called illegal or unauthorized, let's say, is the polite term. In-law units. So we've been trying to give all of those units a path to legalization. So protect the tenants from conversion or demolition of those units, and require and allow the building owners to bring them up to code and turn them into, or keep them as, or turn them into proper habitable units. So we think that's going to be really important in the next few months, as thousands of San Franciscans are housing insecure to begin with. A lot of people have now lost their jobs. We want to do everything we can to preserve affordable rental housing in San Francisco, especially our rent controlled units. So that's been a big focus. And then also allowing folks to add new units in existing underserved spaces, or underused or unused spaces in existing buildings. That kind of adds a diversity to the housing stock, more different types of units available in more different types of neighborhoods, and also different types of households. So if you are a multi-generational household, or want to have an in-home support person come in, or you're on a fixed income and own a house and want to have a little bit of rental income to support you in your retirement, it adds a lot of flexibility. I think a third area where we've looked at regulation is arts organizations, nonprofits, and so on. They also, like small business, are feeling a lot of rental pressure in San Francisco, and have had a hard last few years. So allowing those types of uses to move into different neighborhoods around the city without red tape, I think is another positive thing. I think arts and cultural organizations, nonprofits add a lot to neighborhoods. And they add a lot to city life, and let's make it as easy on them as we can.
Right. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, bouncing around here a little bit, going back to the allowing businesses to have more flexibility and things. So I hear you talking about that these sort of zoning regulations can be loosened up. How does one do that? Is it just you, Tom, going and whispering in someone's ear? Are there different organizations working on it? Can businesses get involved in different groups to influence these decisions?
Yeah, I think we've worked on it a whole variety of ways. There's some neighborhoods where the planning department has created a neighborhood planning process where they said, all right, we're going to do a neighborhood plan, and we look at those plans and try and recommend changes that should be added to those plans that would further small businesses, nonprofits, and so on. So that's one where, like, there's a city process going forward. Another is merchant groups sometimes approach us and say, hey, we have a zoning or a planning problem. Can you give us some solutions? So we try to give them and explain how the regulations work, give them a few solutions that'll work, that'll solve their problem. And then they do the work of going to their supervisor or going to the planning department and getting it. Sometimes supervisors will come to us and say, hey, we've got a lot of vacant storefronts in this neighborhood, or we want to make the zoning friendlier to these types of uses. How do we do it? So we just, wherever the request comes from, we just try and empower people with information, give them options that'll work, explain how it works now, how it might work in the future, what the pros and cons are, and then help, turn that into legislation or incorporate it into a plan and so on, and then show up and support those things through the legislative process. I'll give our network, and we'd urge you to sign up for livablecity.org. Give us your email, and we can actually give you those opportunities too, give the public opportunities to speak up for positive zoning changes here in the city.
Great. Okay, thanks. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our first Thursday Thoughts. So we made it, and no technology glitches that I'm aware of, so that's good. So again, thanks, Tom. And wanted to say, Sonic, thank you again. And Rahili, I know you're out there watching. I hope we did a good job. Anyway, so thank you, everyone. I want to thank our Associate Director, Katie Birnbaum, for making me do this. So anyway, this was fun. And then we will want to also thank our production crew, Angelica Tumandao, who's managing this broadcast right here, and also Amelie Burgueño, who's helping with this, the social media and things. And one last announcement, I want to give a shout out to our Feature Friday. So come back tomorrow at noon, and our Associate Director, Katie, will give you tips about the best small businesses out there. And if you can comment to our Facebook Live tomorrow, you will have a chance for a $25 gift card that you can spend to your heart's delight. So thank you again. Thanks, Tom. And goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks.